Not at 6.
From around the world and from CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
Good evening. President Reagan today voiced a sweeping proposal to eliminate nuclear missiles from Europe and reduce conventional weapons and troops on the continent. Western Europe welcomed the idea. Moscow did not. We have a series of reports, beginning with Bill Plant at the White House.
In his first major foreign policy address, the president moved to seize the initiative on disarmament from the Soviets. Mr. Reagan made his arms control offer in a personal letter to Soviet President Leonid Brezhnev earlier this week. Its centerpiece, a proposal to eliminate medium-range nuclear missiles targeted on Europe and the Soviet Union.
The United States is prepared to cancel its deployment of Pershing II and ground-launched missiles if the Soviets will dismantle their SS-20, SS-4, and SS-5 missiles. This would be an historic step. With Soviet agreement, we could together substantially reduce the dread threat of nuclear war which hangs over the people of Europe. This, like the first footstep on the moon, would be a giant step for mankind.
Pledging that no NATO weapons would ever be used in Europe except in response to an attack, the president charged that there is no current balance of forces in Europe, that the Soviets have an advantage of more than 6 to 1. Mr. Reagan also proposed opening strategic arms limitation talks under a new name as soon as possible next year.
I have informed President Brezhnev that we will seek to negotiate substantial reductions in nuclear arms, which would result in levels that are equal and verifiable. And let us see how far we can go in achieving truly substantial reductions in our strategic arsenals. To symbolize this fundamental change in direction, we will call these negotiations START, Strategic Arms Reduction Talks.
The president also called for a reduced level of conventional forces in Europe and for talks to reduce the danger of war arising from miscalculation. As expected, Mr. Reagan said his proposals require adequate verification. That, sources say, means on-site inspection of the Soviet missile locations, something the Soviets have never allowed.
Success can only come if the Soviet Union will share our commitment, if it will demonstrate that its often repeated professions of concern for peace will be matched by positive action.
Administration officials conceded privately that there was no chance the plan would be accepted by the Soviets, but they think that they have now successfully put the burden onto the other side. Said one senior official, "We are prepared to listen." Bill Plant, CBS News, the White House.
The Kremlin's reaction was quick and angry, accusing President Reagan of trying to get American military superiority through the back door. The Soviet news agency TASS said he cited completely fantastic data about the balance of forces, deliberately keeping silent about American submarines and British and French nuclear missiles. This echoes the line of President Brezhnev, who claims there is already a rough balance of total nuclear forces in Europe. TASS also claimed that Reagan was only pretending to cancel deployment of new American missiles, that he was trying to influence European public opinion. Western diplomats here, non-Americans, say they expect a tough line from the Soviet government initially. They point out that the Russians could drag out negotiations for 2 years, hoping that Western European support for the new American missiles will crumble before they begin to be deployed in 1983. However, the feeling here is that it will be difficult for the Russians to throw out the Reagan proposals altogether. They represent a change in the American emphasis, the diplomats say, and the Europeans will like that. As for the propaganda war in Europe between the two superpowers, one diplomat said tonight, now the initiative is not here. It's back in Washington. Don McNeil, CBS News, Moscow.
Britain's Prime Minister Thatcher and West Germany's Chancellor Schmidt were meeting in Bonn to discuss bilateral matters. As the leaders of the two countries in which the United States has planned to place most of the new missiles that President Reagan is now offering to scrap, they warmly welcomed the initiative.
This is a most important initiative, and I believe that it will receive a very warm welcome, not only in political circles, but in the hearts and minds of people across Europe.
Schmidt, whose political future is threatened by his country's growing anti-nuclear movement, was even more enthusiastic.
That Ronald Reagan is a man who
deep in his heart is searching for peace and is willing to negotiate and negotiate and negotiate.
The president's speech, which was aimed at diffusing the anti-nuclear movement, was transmitted to Europe in time for evening news broadcasts. He spoke directly to the hundreds of thousands of young people who last month staged mass disarmament demonstrations in West European capitals.
But today, a new generation is emerging on both sides of the Atlantic. I understand their concerns. Their questions deserve to be answered. Our policies have resulted in the longest European peace in this century.
After listening to the president's speech, a leader of the British peace movement said the speech was a dishonest attempt to manipulate European public opinion.
It is obviously aimed at taking the pressure off, but we are going to do our damnedest to make sure the pressure remains steadily on those governments to refuse any more weapons. There are quite enough nuclear weapons in this world already.
It's a measure of the political impact of the European anti-nuclear movement that Reagan and Brezhnev are now trying to upstage each other with disarmament proposals. Western officials believe Brezhnev, who offered his own disarmament proposal several weeks ago, may even offer new concessions when he visits West Germany next week. Tom Fenton, CBS News, London.
Now, what may be the significance of the president's speech? What does it mean for him, for us, and for the chances of nuclear arms reduction? In his new role on this broadcast as analyst and commentator, Bill Moyers has spent the day trying to find the answers. Bill?
Dan, I talked today with a man wise in the ways of the world whose private duties and personal integrity have often made him an unofficial liaison between Soviets and Americans, even when relations between the two countries have been at lowest ebb. He had only praise for Mr. Reagan's speech. Because war and peace are at stake, he says, we have no relationship more important than Moscow. So communications between the two governments ought not to be a matter of reward or penalty. Jimmy Carter felt he had no option but to stop talking with the Soviets after they invaded Afghanistan. But the world was made a more dangerous place once communications broke down. In his letter to President Brezhnev and his speech today, Mr. Reagan resumes a process that needs to go on irrespective of ideology, animosity, or even bad behavior. Nor is it necessary to trust the Russians in order to find common ground on the nuclear threat. The president spoke of twice in his lifetime having seen Europe plunged into the tragedy of war. Perhaps that will help him understand why Europeans are increasingly uneasy over yet a third war, this time fought with nuclear weapons. It should also help him to understand how the Russians see things. World War II is the single most formative event in the life of every member of the Soviet Politburo. None of them can forget that 20 million Russians died at the hands of the Germans. No matter how much we mistrust them or deplore their ideology, we have to work on the premise that they're not suicidal. They wish a nuclear war no more than we. There is much yet to be said about the proposals Mr. Reagan has made. There are tricky problems of definition and verification and the sensitivity of the negotiators. But for the moment, on this issue, the President has tipped his hat and his administration away from ideology toward reality. That is a start. Dan?
Thank you, Bill. I'll be back in a minute with more of today's news.
Sometimes even the best of days make you wish for time to get away. A silhouette time can sweep you off your feet. It's your own special time, so sit back and relax with Silhouette Romance.
Each month there are 6 new Silhouette romances, and now for teenagers, new First Love from Silhouette.
Silhouette Romance.
Rare whooping cranes spend the winter on the Aransas Peninsula in southern Texas, where Conoco produces oil and natural gas. For protecting the crane's habitat, we were the first company to receive the Citation of Merit from the National Audubon Society, which shows we think that America's energy can be developed even as America's environment is preserved. Conoco, now combined with DuPont for a better energy future.
Ronald Reagan got a lot of labor votes in his successful run for the presidency, but the AFL-CIO convention in New York this week has been fertile ground for Democrats. Republicans have stayed away in droves. Richard Wagner has today's convention story.
Senator Edward Kennedy today joined the procession of prominent Democrats who have come to this convention to blast Reaganomics. President Reagan and Budget Director David Stockman have been taking a beating this week.
Now, frankly, I'm not satisfied with the way the president has handled this situation. The only result so far is that David Stockman gets taken to the woodshed and the rest of us get taken to the cleaners.
Kennedy also reminded the delegates of what he sees as traditional differences between Democrats and Republicans.
Other leaders in other days have appealed to our best instincts as a nation. They have challenged our people to give something back to America in return for all that America has given to us. Instead, this administration has summoned us to selfishness. They have replaced a tradition of compassion with a standard of greed.
Senator Kennedy's speech and those of former Vice President Mondale and House Speaker O'Neill on previous days give this convention the feel of a national Democratic political gathering. Indeed, many of the speakers here talk more about electing Democrats to Congress next year than they do about AFL-CIO business. Richard Wagner, CBS News, New York.
AFL-CIO conventions often are a kind of early tryout camp for would-be Democratic presidential hopefuls. And so it is this year, as Bruce Morton reports.
Senator Edward Kennedy visited the AFL-CIO convention today and took time out to talk a little politics. He and Walter Mondale, he told the delegates, were the frontrunners for the Democratic presidential nomination.
But I want to tell you here and now, neither Fritz nor I like to hear that kind of talk. I don't like to hear it about him, and he doesn't like to hear it about me.
Nobody is really running yet, of course, but people are jogging, doing deep knee bends, getting ready, like appearing before big labor, which may endorse a candidate in the primaries next time. Kennedy is a frontrunner. He must win re-election to the Senate next year, but the consensus is he could sleep all fall and do that. He has a political action committee, which is raising money to help other candidates in 1982. Walter Mondale is the other frontrunner. He, too, has a PAC raising money for 1982 Democratic hopefuls. But both Mondale and Kennedy ended 1980 as losers. No one has a lock on 84, and many expect a large field, including John Glenn, second-term senator from Ohio. Lots of name recognition from his astronaut days. Being a hero never hurt. Gary Hart, second-term senator from Colorado. He's doing more speeches now, too, aides say, but concentrating on issues. Why not? It worked for George McGovern, whose campaign Hart managed. Jerry Brown of California. I've done it twice, he said recently. I don't know about doing it again. His first problem is to get elected senator next year. Unlike Kennedy, he is not a cinch. Former Florida Governor Ruben Askew has formed a committee to explore the waters, and he'll spend about 1 week a month getting his feet wet. And two more long shots, Governors Jay Rockefeller of West Virginia and John Y. Brown of Kentucky. Relative unknowns? Sure. So was Carter. Has the campaign really started already? Not quite. Is John Glenn really going to New Hampshire to make a speech this Friday night? Yes, he really is. His staff says they can't understand why so many reporters have been asking questions about that. Bruce Morton, CBS News, New York.
Recently, a few extraordinary wines were entered in a prestigious international competition. Wines made from costly varietal grapes, harvested in some of the world's finest growing regions. An oak-aged Chardonnay, a deep, full-flavored Burgundy, a light, dry Chenin Blanc, a varietal Rosé, a spicy Gewürztraminer. And each of these wines, all from a single winemaker, was judged to be among the best of the world.
Silver medal, gold medal, silver, gold, gold medal.
The wines, all from America, all from California, and all from the wine cellars of America's premier vintners, Ernest and Julio Gallo. The award-winning wines of Ernest and Julio Gallo.
Once a month, as you may have noticed, we dutifully report the Commerce Department's latest figures on new housing starts, down such and such %. dry statistics, easily overlooked or quickly forgotten. But the cumulative effect of that monthly decline is pretty dreadful. George Herman in Washington explains the latest figures and puts them in grim perspective.
It's a real depression for the housing industry. When you discount the growth of the population, it's the worst year since 1933, when the Great Depression was at its height. A year ago, housing starts were over 1.5 million a year. In January, when the Reagan administration took office, they were even higher. Last month, they had plunged to a rate of 857,000, down 44% in a year. Single-family homes, part of the American dream, had fallen even more sharply, down 25% in 1 month. Michael Sumakrast says there's no mystery about the reason.
We don't have any money. We have no cash. Liquidity has been totally eroded. People are dying in the trenches. You don't see these people. They don't hit the front page of the paper.
Is this the bottom, October?
No, we got another 3 to 4 months to go of very low and possibly declining rate. It's a mess. We are really in a big mess.
Even if interest rates should plunge, says Sumakrast, the battered housing industry will not really recover its full health until late 1982, perhaps not until 1983. George Herman, CBS News, Washington.
The Commerce Department also reported today that personal income of Americans rose 0.6% last month, the smallest increase since May. And the department said that, in apparent concern about the recession, Americans cut back their spending for the first time since April. Personal spending was down 0.2% in October. One economist called that report not very good news for the economy in general and Christmas shopping in particular. Federal Reserve Board Chairman Volcker acknowledged today that the board's tight credit policies are causing pain. But he added, if we are going to be successful in fighting inflation, we have to stay the course. Volcker said, we've come to this point or close to it before and then backed off, only to find ourselves in a worse dilemma with a greater problem.
Wang announces the most important step in managing information since the computer, WangNet. WangNet is the electronic connection that gives anyone in your office any kind of information they need instantly by linking together every conceivable kind of office equipment, no matter who makes it. WangNet links you to floors below or satellites above, using just half its capacity, leaving room, of course, for Wang's next breakthrough in office automation.
In Colombia, South America, it is a tradition to celebrate the Day of the Farmer. To celebrate for men like Juan Valdez, who for centuries have gone to the fields to pick by hand only the coffee beans that are ready, because it is their dedication to the heritage of Colombian coffee that makes it the richest coffee in the world. And that is worth celebrating.
In Fort Collins, Colorado, the defense won a round today in the trial of Eugene Tafoya. Tafoya is accused of trying to murder a Libyan living in this country, Faisal Zagalai, on orders from Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi. Gary Shepard is covering the trial.
Eugene Tafoya's defense attorneys scored a major tactical victory here today when they successfully convinced the court to prohibit introduction of a taped phone conversation as evidence against the former Green Beret. On the recording found at the time Tafoya was arrested, the defendant is heard making himself available for an assignment. The transcript quotes Tafoya as asking a man named Jim, "Do you know anybody that should quit breathing permanently?" But the prosecution team had argued the tape was vital to its case to prove Tafoya's motive. The district attorney's chief investigator called the ruling a crippling blow.
Anybody reading that transcript can see what it says. Do you need anyone to stop breathing permanently? What is that supposed to mean? Who's supposed to stop breathing?
He was putting himself up for hire.
Well, it sure gives an indication of that.
Another former Green Beret, James Dean, flown in from Fayetteville, North Carolina, is the other voice on the tape, according to investigators, and would have been used to link Tafoya with former CIA agent Edwin Wilson, the so-called Libyan connection.
Jimmy Dean told me personally that he worked for Ed Wilson for over 2 years, and that he had been to Tripoli and abroad. and engaged in activity with Ed Wilson and other Green Berets.
Was it Dean who hired Tafoya on behalf of Wilson?
I can't reach a conclusion on that.
He didn't
we sure suspect it.
Defense lawyers were delighted with the court's ruling.
Is Gene Tafoya breathing a little easier now?
Well, I'd rather not comment. He's eating well.
Tafoya himself had this to say about the day's proceedings. I'm not on trial here. Wilson and Gaddafi are. Gary Shepard, CBS News, Fort Collins, Colorado.
For years, some veterans have claimed their health was damaged by exposure to Agent Orange, the herbicide used to kill crops and clear jungles in Vietnam. Approximately 67,000 of them have taken Veterans Administration medical examinations, and 10,500 have filed compensation claims. But the VA has not honored those claims, contending a study must first establish an actual link between exposure and health problems. Today, VA Administrator Robert Nimmo told a Senate committee that if the government decided to compensate veterans for harm caused by Agent Orange, the cost will run into billions of dollars for years to come. Nimmo said, "We would be looking at hundreds of millions of dollars per year going into the middle of the next century." One senator later said he believes that compensation cost is a big factor in delaying any conclusion about health damage caused by the herbicide. President Reagan created more clouds today over the payment made by a Japanese magazine for an interview with his wife. Mr. Reagan said the matter was, quote, investigated, and it was reported that everything was fine, unquote. But his remarks only caused confusion because a Justice Department investigation is still underway. Tonight, the White House issued a statement saying the remarks referred to an oral FBI report to White House aide Edwin Meese. That report, we're told, advised Meese there was no need for action. In Japan, as Gordon Josoloff reports, there are fresh details about the interview itself.
Officials of the monthly magazine Shifuno Tomo, or Housewife's Friend, made public today a thank you note from Mrs. Reagan received more than 3 months after the controversial meeting. Managing Director Yukio Takashio cited the brief note as evidence that not only did the meeting take place, a meeting of which Mrs. Reagan has said she only has a vague recollection, but that the president's wife was pleased to welcome the magazine's team. The letter makes no mention of the $1,000 gratuity paid by the magazine and which later turned up in a safe once used by Presidential National Security Advisor Richard Allen. The letter discloses that there was a second gift made at the time of the meeting, a hand-painted stationery box given to Mrs. Reagan. The magazine executive did not say how much the present was worth. As for White House allegations that some of the quotes attributed to Mrs. Reagan in the article were not said by her, Takashio said he has confidence in the interviewer, Fyoko Kamasaka. Ms. Kamasaka showed the same letter to a Japanese newspaper today and said she was very upset that the White House had sought to cast doubt on what she had written. Gordon Josoloff, CBS News, Tokyo.
Former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger found himself in trouble in the Brazilian capital of Brasilia today. Hundreds of student protesters besieged a building at Brasilia University where Kissinger was lecturing, trapping him inside for about 2 hours. Riot police led him and members of his audience away under a barrage of eggs and shouted insults. Kissinger returned unharmed to his hotel in a police van.
He was the kind of a guy who didn't expect much from today's small cars, just practicality, nothing more. Then he saw the 1982 Oldsmobile Omega and realized he'd been expecting too little. This four-cylinder, front-wheel drive Olds Omega had style. He could imagine the luxury inside, the smooth, quiet ride. Olds Omega, he smiled. Even today, there's still room to do it with style.
Here in Emilia, to make a good wine, you need a blend of Marani grapes, Salamino, Maestri, and Monterico. But to make a great wine, you need the missing grape, the Lanciolotta. Riuniti adds the Lanciolotta because only Riuniti can grow it to perfection. This missing grape makes Riuniti the best-selling imported wine in America. Pure and natural Riuniti, also in white and rosé. If you haven't tried Riuniti, you don't know what you're missing.
How would you react if large sums of money came suddenly into your life? Well, there were two greatly different reactions today. Dr. Barbara McClintock, who is a 79-year-old geneticist from Cold Spring Harbor, New York, Almost simultaneously, she has received a MacArthur Foundation award guaranteeing her $60,000 a year, tax-free, for life, a $15,000 Albert Lasker Award, and a $50,000 prize from Israel's Wolf Foundation. She calls that too much at once and is afraid the attention would disturb her privacy.
I don't care for things, particularly. I don't like to accumulate. Remember, years ago, all I cared about was a pair of glasses in a car, and now all I care about is a pair of glasses.
Today's other winner is not a scientist, but a man who's been buying a $1 ticket every week in the New York State Lottery. On Friday the 13th, as David Culhane reports, this man made a choice that changed his life.
Sit down. His name is Lou Eisenberg. He is 53. He lives in Brooklyn and takes the subway to Manhattan, where he is in charge of electrical maintenance in a skyscraper. And Lou Eisenberg just won $5 million. Maybe the biggest lottery prize in history.
I put in light bulbs, I do maintenance work. And while I was doing this, I said, what kind of a nut am I? I'm putting in light bulbs, I'm a millionaire. Something's wrong. And it was a nice day. It was a wild day. I'm a nervous wreck.
Lou has two grown-up children, Cheryl and Alan. His wife, Bernice, had cancer a while back, but now she has recovered. Lou was so dumbfounded at his good fortune that he called the lottery 7 times to make sure it wasn't a mistake. And then he told Bernice.
And I said to my wife, Bernice, sit down. We have something I want to tell you. I said, I think we're millionaires. She says, don't kid around. Please don't kid around.
I says, this is no joke. Now stop. And I called too.
Then she called 7 times.
He says he likes the people he works with, but without regret, he is going to leave his $225 a week job.
I like the sun, I like swimming, and I like theater, I like everything. And I really hadn't had a chance to do too many things.
And then Lou Eisenberg summed up his good fortune.
For 53 years, I was eating bread, and I want to try eating cake.
Retirement, he says, is the American way of life.
Yes.
David Culhane, CBS News, New York.
And that's the CBS Evening News for this Wednesday. Dan Rather reporting from New York. Good night.
This shield shows Total has 100% of the recommended daily allowance of these 9 vitamins and iron.
Yeah?
Put Total Shield on one of these boxes. See how the 9 vitamins compare.
Let me try Raisin Bran. 25%? Total's a lot higher. But how does Total taste?
Crispy flakes of whole grain wheat.
Mmm.
And 100% of these 9 vitamins. That's the total difference.
Hello. I was a dedicated blade shaver till my wife bought me this Remington microscreen shaver because it would shave as close as a blade or your money back. The first microscreen is so thin it shaves incredibly close. The second even closer. And Remington's American made. It costs less. Norelco's imported. It costs much more. I was so impressed, I bought the company. The Remington microscreen shaves as close as a blade or I'll give you your money back. And the Lady Remington, the perfect gift, also with a money-back guarantee.
From around the world and from CBS News headquarters in New York, this has been the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
I'm Diane Sawyer. Charles Kuralt and I are going to talk with Defense Secretary Weinberger about nuclear weapons in Europe. We hope you join us tomorrow on Morning.
This is CBS.
Tanya Bieber takes the stand in her son